So, An Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. I will give an overall rating. Hello wanderers, welcome back to my channel and thank you for clicking on this video. So, today I'm going to be reviewing a book written by Neil Gaiman called An Ocean at the End of the Lane. So, if you've ever read Neil Gaiman, you'll be able to recognize his writing style, his pacing, and his structure very easily. He's got a very unique style of writing and everything else. So I think it's very easy once you've read a Neil Gaiman book to be like, that's Neil Gaiman. And this book is pretty typical of Neil Gaiman style. So you'll be able to recognize it very quickly. If you haven't read Neil Gaiman, he does have, as I've already said, his writing style is very unique. So some people may find it a little bit, not off-putting I would say, but I think they would find it very new, not something you would be typically find in usual books that are very popular and all of those kinds of things. So I think it is something that you have to kind of get through by yourself. You have to read the first 2 chapters and so that you can get used to his writing style and his pacing and how he structures his books. But once you've done that, the books come very naturally. I personally really enjoy the writing style and his structures. I think that not only are they unique, but they're very positively unique. So I really enjoy reading his books. If you don't know Neil Gaiman, he has written several novels. He isn't really known for his series, but he has written several novels, some of which have been turned into movies, namely the Coraline, the animation. The book was written by Neil Gaiman, the Netflix series The Sandman, as well as American Gods. Those were all written by Neil Gaiman and were adapted to television, which is really cool. So yeah, if you haven't read his books before, give them a try, let me know what you think. I know a couple of them are very popular, some of them less popular, but of course everyone has their own style of reading and read what they want to read. So anyway, moving on to An Ocean at the End of the Lane. So the introduction to this book is very slow. It's quite a dull introduction. It goes through a lot of exposition. It kind of introduces you into this character, the main character, who's an unnamed character. Kind of brings you into his world. Starts off kind of in present time, then moves back into the past, and we kind of interweave into that in the first couple of chapters, and then we go completely into the past for most of the book. So Neil Gaiman did say that the book can seem very childish, which is why he paced the beginning of the book so slowly, simply because he didn't want children to be reading this. This is not a book for children, despite the fact that it is told from a child's perspective. So one thing I think Neil Gaiman does very well is somehow with a lot of his books, he manages to make them kind of nostalgic, which I think is really cool. So in this case, with this particular book, he has made it very much a nostalgia towards childhood. So that would be being a child, you know, back when you were a child, having your imagination run free and having the creativity and, you know, also that feeling of not really understanding. You know, you know a lot more than what your parents think you know, but they don't know that you know, but you know that you know. So I like that nostalgia that he brings in. I think that is very cool, and he does it in a way that I think is relatable to everyone. The main character is a male child. He's living in a place that maybe you haven't lived before, but he brings in these characteristics of childhood that I think a lot of people will be able to relate to. So the story is about this little boy, and he has a friend who lives down the lane called Lettie. Now Lettie lives with her mother and her grandmother, and the 3 of them live in this little farmhouse. And at this farmhouse they've got a pond, and to Lettie the pond is an ocean. So we kind of get this introduction to this boy. He's got a very normal childhood. He's kind of just doing as he does as a kid. His relatable kidness, as we can say. So I think he gets introduced to Lettie, and I think from that moment, Neil Gaiman immediately kind of brings out everything. He builds up to it a little bit using imagination, using the child's perspective, using the child's personality. But the minute Lettie comes in, the whole book takes a good switch. And I think that it's very, very interesting how it goes from being a relatively fictional kind of book, turning it way more into the fantasy aspects. You've got creatures that's from folklores that perhaps you've never heard of before. You've got creatures from folklores that maybe you've heard too much about. And I think that it is very, very cool how Neil Gaiman can bring all of these aspects into a realistic setting. Remember, we're in some kind of town in, I assume, America, and it's kind of just like an ordinary introduction to the story, and then suddenly he's able to bring in this extraordinary aspect, which I think was very, very well done, and I did enjoy it. And yeah, so I think that the pacing starts up very, very slow, and then starts to build, and then once we meet Lettie, it kind of just takes off from there, and it's really, really cool. As for the characters, I think because it's a single novella and it's not really a very long book at all. It's a novel. It's a relatively short, one of Neil Gaiman's shorter novels. So he manages to bring in a story in such a short amount of pages. So I do believe that the characters don't get fleshed out as much as they would in, say, a series or a trilogy or even just a longer book. But what Neil Gaiman does very, very well with his characters is that what you see is kind of who they are. You know, you can tell by the way the dad treats his kids how he is. You can tell by the character's sibling how they are. You can tell that the character, or obviously we are looking through the characters. The character we get to flesh out a little bit more. But the way that the character meets the grandmother, the crone, it's immediately indicative of how the crone is, what her personality is. And I think that's very, very cool. It's a nice, easy way to get us to meet the characters, but at the same time, know the characters already. So, I'm not going to get too much into the plot because I do not want to spoil it for too many people. I want you to go out and read the book for yourself. But the basic plot is that there is a series of events that have happened, and lucky events that have happened. And Lettie and this unnamed character, our main character, they go together and they need to try and right these wrongs and just get all this unluck filtered out, get it refreshed, exorcised, whatever you want to call it. And they need to do this together. And Lettie kind of introduces him to this whole new world that he never saw before, that he maybe doesn't want to see still. And she brings her ocean into it, and I think it's very, very cool. They go through it is a kind of coming of age story. They go through a series of events that kind of make the main character still be a child. He is still a child, but you see him grow. You see it's not a coming of age story, but you see that process of where he started, all of his ignorance, all of that, and where he is now, where he has that knowledge and he was able to grow with the knowledge and all of that, which I think was very, very cool. My copy of An Ocean at the End of the Lane is an illustrated copy, which I think is so, so cool. I'm really starting to get into these illustrated books. I've got this one, and then I've got A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness, which I will do in another video because it is epic, also illustrated. And I know a lot of the time illustrations can feel comic booky, or they can make a novel feel too clustered, too busy, but I really think these illustrations give a depth to the plot. You can really see how these pictures have an impact on the plot. They're not just there because they can be there. They're there because they make an impact, because they try and help you get immersed into the book, which I think is really, really cool. So, An Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman, I will give an overall rating of 3.5 stars to. And I really do think it's something that if you're feeling nostalgic, if you're looking for a short, easy read that's so impactful, I really do think that this is the book for you. Thanks guys, thank you for watching, and keep wondering. Bye.